Do you want to make an EFE Code 3 tanker lorry? We'll show you how we did ours here at St Blazey Model World. Hi guys, if you're new to the channel, welcome on in. If you're a returning viewer, thanks for sticking around. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up, a comment, and of course subscribe. It's free to subscribe, and if you hit the bell icon as well, you'll get an alert every time we release a new video from the channel. It's all free. So, Code 3 tanker lorries. A little while ago we produced a few of these for somebody, and there were a couple left over which went onto eBay, and we'll show you how we did them. Stick around. So just before we get into this, if you're new to the hobby and you're not sure what Code 3 means, well, Code 3 is simply taking a production model from a mainstream manufacturer and turning it into something that they do not make, be it modifying the shape or size of the vehicle or changing the livery, and that's Code 3. So without further ado, we just and we love our Code 3s, by the way, here at St Blazey Model World. We'll just give you a real quick montage of some of the Code 3s that have been produced here over the last few months, and then we'll get into the tanker. So the very first thing to do is unbox our donor model, and again, if you're new to the world of Code 3, when we talk about a donor model, we are talking about the model that will form the basis of our Code 3 project. So here's our donor model. This is a Seddon Atkinson tanker, slightly different model to the ones that appeared in the start of this video, but the principles are exactly the same. And the first thing that we need to do is remove the tanker unit from the chassis of the vehicle. So when we turn this model over, the first thing that we notice is that there are 3 rivets on this chassis. The first one there, and the third one there. It is these two, this one here at the very back of the model and the one just behind the front wheels. Those are the two that we need to drill out in order to remove our tank unit from the chassis of the model. So when it comes to removing the rivets, we're going to use our trusty cordless drill, and we've gone for a 3mm drill bit to start with. Just see it there, and if that doesn't release the tanker, then we'll step it up a gear and move to something like a 5mm, and we'll see how we go. I'm not bothered about damage to the chassis really, because that will be touched up by paint. Chassis is going to get a repaint anyway, and any damage there, well, that really won't matter. So there we are, the iron filings that you can see are evidence that the process is complete. We'll just have a quick look at the chassis. We've got our 2 holes where our rivets were, one there and one there, and then when we turn to the tanker unit itself, we can see the remnants of those 2 holes, or the 2 rivets rather, and at the moment they're a little bit of a mess, but that's not a problem because we're going to use our rotary Dremel tight device just to get rid of the burr of those rivets. If you don't have a Dremel, then a set of needle files will do exactly the same job, and we'll just smooth those down, ready for when it's time to reattach the tank body to the chassis of our model. So as you can see, the rivets have now been flattened, and they've only been flattened enough to allow the tanker unit itself to sit back onto the chassis of the model. There's no need to go berserk here and take them right the way down, just enough so that they sit and the tanker remains where it should. And you can very easily test that just by turning the tanker over, locating it into the right space, And if you turn it over, you can see there the rivet holes, and then you can see there that the red line that forms the base of the tanker has joined parallel to the chassis, and that means that that part of the job has been successfully carried out. What comes next? Well, as you can see on the back of this tanker, we've got some tampo printing. That's going to come off simply because it interferes with the painting process. And there's a couple of ways to do that, but if you missed it, there'll be a link to my video on removing tampo printing right now, top right hand corner of the screen. And as we look around this model, we can see that there is also some tampo printing on the cab doors. It's not very clear on the film, but it is there. And again, if we look at the front of this model, we can just see that there's some tampo printing there. And again, on the film, I'm afraid it doesn't show up very well, but it's just here above the cab windows. We're going to get rid of all of that so that we've got a clean surface if we decide to paint. So as usual for me, it's nail varnish remover and cotton buds as a first step, and we'll get this tampo printing off and then see what comes next. Well, as you can see there, 2 cotton buds have been used each end, so that's 4 in total, but the tampo printing has gone, and now this tanker is completely devoid of any identity, and that's exactly what we want. I have to say, I don't know, as far as I know, I'm the only modeller that uses nail varnish remover to remove tampo printing. I'm not aware of anybody else that does it, but I've seen some models absolutely butchered by people trying to remove tampo printing. Nail varnish remover really is a great tip, cheap to buy. You can get it from most corner shops and of course the supermarkets as well. Give it a go. The next job on the agenda is this moulding line, and I'll just point it out now. It runs right down the centre at the very top of this tanker. That's not a deliberate piece of design, it's where the component has come out of the injection moulding, and we want to get rid of that. There's a couple of ways of going about it. You could use a scalpel and scrape it off. You could use some sandpaper or some fine emery paper and remove it, bit of wet and dry, something like that. Or you could use a needle file. But having already used cotton buds and nail varnish remover in this video, it won't surprise you to learn that my solution comes from the world of cosmetics. And this is a nail file. I think they're sometimes called emery boards, and these are ideal for this type of work because they give you a fine finish, will remove bits of odd plastic, and allow us to get the finish that we need. So now, after a couple of seconds work with the emery board, you can see that the ridge has been removed. We just look further back, you can see where it still remains. Of course, in doing this, I have applied a little bit of damage to the top of the tanker, but this item is going to be painted, and before the painting, of course, it will be treated with primer, and the primer is sufficient that it will give us a smooth surface there. The next part of our project involves removing the cab, and you wouldn't necessarily need to do this if you were quite happy with the colour that the cab was in. And even if you did want to repaint the cab, you could actually get pretty well all the way around it now with the tanker section removed. But for the purposes of this video, to show you how it's done, we're going to do this. So we'll turn it over, and you remember when we looked at removing the tank unit itself, we had the 3 rivets. So there are now 2 holes, one at the back there, one just behind the front wheels, and right in the middle of the front wheels on this model you can see another rivet, and that's the one that we're going to drill out to remove our cab. When you are drilling out these rivets, you'll feel a pop on the drill. Even if you're using a power drill, you'll feel a little kickback in the drill, and that tells you that you've broken through the rivet and you don't need to drill any further. Because if you did keep drilling, of course, you'd go straight into the main carcass of whatever it was you were trying to remove, and you'd have more repair work to do. But as it is, we've got this this rivet removed. Our cab is here, it's free, and now of course we can just take out the interior, and we can remove the glazing as well. It's just there, so that will come out as well, ready for painting. So now of course we're left with the remains of our rivet on the cab, and the profile of this one is quite high. You can see the rivet, it's just there. Early morning traffic just going past, and you can see there that the rivet also stands quite proud. Now on this, as opposed to the tanker, I'm going to take all of that off, and that will leave that rectangular surface there ready to accept the glue when we reassemble the model. Whilst we've got the interior out of the vehicle, it's a good time to look at improving that as well. And if you missed my series on improving the interiors of model buses, have a look through the channel. You'll see lots of videos there about doing that. And of course this follows the standard production method of one colour plastic, which to be honest isn't entirely realistic. So this interior will get a coat of primer and a rework, and we'll try and squeeze a driver and a passenger into there as well, because this particular model is going to somebody who is not very keen on driverless trains and vehicles on their model railway layout. So now here's our cab. I've gone over it with a Scotch cloth just to give a bit of a key for our primer. You can remove these radiators, they do come out, but I find they tend to break, and unless you really need to, I wouldn't bother doing that. What I'm going to do now with this is give it a wipe over with a degreaser just to remove the dust from the Scotch cloth treatment. The radiator will be masked off, and then we'll give it a coat of primer ready for our top coat of paint. So we've come outside now and we've sprayed our three components in primer: the tanker unit, the cab and the interior, ready for our top coat treatments. Now whilst our model is going to get finished in acrylics, the primer is of course an enamel paint, and if you're using those, please remember to make sure, get outside if you can, always stay safe. If you have to spray inside, make sure you wear a face mask and use PPE in accordance with guidelines. So now we've brought our model back inside. We've got the three component parts. The glazing is separate, of course, we haven't treated that. And the radiator on this cab, because I haven't removed it on this occasion, I've used some of my trusty Tamiya model maker's masking tape that you can see there on the left hand side. I did a video on this a little while ago. Just have a quick look through my gallery of videos, you'll find it there, available in different sizes. It's a great product, and the reason why I've used it here is that this radiator had a logo on it, the Seddon Atkinson logo, and that would be difficult to recreate, so I've just masked that off to protect it. Everything else we're going to deal with. So whilst our top coat colours on our tank cab and the tank itself are drying, it's a quick time to have a look at the cab and what I've done with it. I've followed the same principles as I have for improving the interior of EFE model buses, and we've done away of course with the one colour moulded injection plastic cab, and we've introduced a crew as well. Looks good. So the next process really is to give some thought to our chassis. Well, all I'm going to do here is to touch up the black paint rather, where I drilled out the rivets, and of course I've got to do something about those horrible wheels. Red, no, not for this project. So I've removed all of the tyres, and there's more of them than you might think. There are 2 tyres on each back wheel, so it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and of course on this chassis we've got a spare wheel there as well, 13 tyres we've had to remove to do this, but it will be worth the effort. Now there are two reasons for taking all of these tyres off of the model. Obviously the wheels themselves are one colour plastic like the cab was, the interior. And we're going to paint, or have painted in this case, the outward facing edge of the wheels. But we also want to do something about the inner edge as well. And on this particular model, the inner edges have been painted black all the way down. And the reason for that is that if the model is going to sit on a railway diorama, doesn't really matter, you're not going to see the insides of the wheels. But if the model is sitting in a display case, and particularly if that case has got glass shelves, you could very easily see the insides of the wheels, and it's just one of those finishing touches really that sets off the model rather than looking at the red plastic. The remaining red plastic that you can see here will all be covered up once the tyres are replaced. Well, we're not far now from the final reassembly of our model. The tyres have been put back on and the cab has been glued into place. There's nothing wrong with using super glue on these lorries. Unlike the buses and the coaches, the glue points are far enough away from the glazing that the vapour from the super glue won't affect them. Just before we put the tanker body back on this lorry, I think it's a good time to just run through a little bit of what we've done so far. Of course, the whole model has had a bit of a rework and a repaint, and you can see that we've done away with the red that we started with, and we've now gone to this cream colour. Let's have a quick look in the cab. We've got our crew there. Oops, sorry. We've got our crew there. You can just about see them. A driver and a driver's mate. We have, of course, reapplied all of the tyres. On the fuel tank here, you'll notice that we've applied some silver to the fuel tank straps, and we've detailed out the fuel filler cap as well. The front wheels have silver hubs and the rear wheels have a dark brown hub, although that's not particularly clear on the camera, but that's part of the colour of the tanker livery. And at the rear of the vehicle, the observant ones will have noticed that we've actually added a tailboard with a couple of lights on, the red lights and the indicators on the outside of those. That actually wasn't there originally, but the model didn't look right without that detail, so we've put it on. And for that I've used a piece of cardboard left over from an old Metcalf platform kit, and just painted it, glued it on, painted it black, and then detailed in the lights. Now, despite the repainting, this model has been refitted with its original cab, and it will get its original body on, which was of course the fuel tanker. But this is a good point in time to point out that the body that goes on there isn't necessarily the one, or has to be necessarily the one, that came off, because we've now got complete access to the chassis, and if we wanted to build a flatbed truck or anything else on there, we could actually do that. And we could actually lift components off of other types of EFE lorries and attach them and swap the cabs around as well. So the scope for the Code 3 modeler actually is pretty large with this stuff, because EFE produce everything to one scale, and that is 1/76. And the beauty of that scale is, of course, that it's suitable for use on 00 gauge railways and model railroads if you're across the pond, and that makes them ideal for this type of work. So the last piece now is reuniting the body with the chassis, and of course the tanker was the original body on this chassis. You'll remember at the start of this video we drilled out two holes, or two rivets, one here and one just back here. They make excellent gluing points for reattaching the chassis to the body. Just make sure that the body is on straight and sitting flush, and by that I mean that line there, you can see it, the line at the bottom of those tanker holders there is flush with the chassis. Super glue will do the job. You just need a couple of spots and you're done. And that's about it really. There are some decals to go on this model, but I'm not going to do that on camera because that will reveal instantly the recipient of this model, and if that person chooses to make public this donation, that's up to them, and if they don't, that's fine as well. So we'll just very quickly remind ourselves of what we started with and see what we've ended up with. So we've got a two-tone tanker, mostly cream in livery. The bottom that you can see here is actually a very dark brown, almost black. This is going to match something else that's going to the person concerned. And we'll just turn it round. You can see there the spare wheel, the tailboard that we've added with the lights, and the detailing on the fuel tank, as well, of course, the indicators. And at the front, you'll remember at the start I said about taping over the grille just to preserve that Seddon Atkinson logo, and you can see it's still there. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember to comment. If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and of course subscribe. We've got lots more videos in the can. I'm not sure which will be the next one out, but lots more to come. If you subscribe, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Then you won't miss a single thing, because you'll get an alert every time we release a new video. That's it for this time. Stay safe, please. Take care of yourselves. Bye from St. Blazy Model World.